see that just about everyone got the memo about wearing appropriate government operations colors today. So it's nice to see everyone, almost everyone, color coordinated. Thank you for participating in a little humor. Let's see, I have learned that Rich John won't be here today, Holly Moshe won't be here today, and we are not going to have an update from the Public Information Advisory Board because the chair of that board is also not able to be here today. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Mike?
I want to move to change the color of the agenda.
All right, we can consider that later in the meeting.
I probably won't get a second, but
I like this color. I think everyone looks really good in this color. So. Any other changes to the agenda? All right. Comments from the public? I don't think we have anyone. Let's take the minutes of August 3rd. Somebody with Susan moves. Seconded by Mike. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Looks good. Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, then we're going to go right to our partners and consultants at Very Dunn to give us an update on our strategic operations planning. And who's here? Karen's here. Hi.
Hey, good morning. How is everybody?
Good morning. We're doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. I've got a PowerPoint I'm going to bring up, and then we can walk through an update on where we are with the strategic planning process. And I have to say, as we get going, I'm very excited that the next time I see y'all will not be as this big face on the screen, but actually in person at a human scale. Yes, I'm very much looking forward to that next week.
Yeah, it'll be great to meet you in person.
Yeah. So a little bit of an update today about what we're planning to accomplish next week with the process. I think I spoke to y'all almost exactly 3 months ago about the plan, what we were trying to accomplish, the stakeholder engagement, and really the steps along the way. So today is a great time to do a touch point about where we are, all the stakeholder engagement that we've been conducting over the summer, what we're planning to accomplish next week while Dr. Christine Moses and I are there with you all, and then where we're going from there. So first, to ground everybody and to remind what is the strategic operations plan and what we're trying to accomplish. First of all, it's the what you all want to achieve over the next 3 to 5 years and how you're going to align your budget to that plan. We'll get that plan done, what you want to do, and then we'll work with you all also on the how, the implementation. So putting all of those things together to say, this is where we're going, this is why we're going there, this is how we're going to fund where we're going from an operational standpoint, and then being able to report that back to your constituents and residents, community members from a transparency standpoint, so everybody understands what you're trying to accomplish and the why. A little bit about the way the process works. So we are right in the middle as step number 2, the community stakeholder engagement. We'll be there next week, like I've alluded to, conducting community forums and client focus groups.
I don't think your slides are.
Yes.
I don't think your slides are advancing. If you are.
Are they not
We're
advancing?
Still on the Tompkins County page.
Oh dear. Let me stop and try again. You all see the graphic of the overview of the process?
Yes, now we can.
Oh, okay. I apologize for that. So like I mentioned, we're in the stakeholder engagement phase. That is the longest phase really of the process, and we're getting great input from members of your community really across the board. We'll go from there into the plan development with you all with some workshops with the legislature in early November, followed by staff in early December, and then we'll get into the implementation planning process in the first of the new year. So a little bit more about the community engagement and stakeholder process that we've been going through. The first two things you'll see, the social pinpoint site and the stakeholder interviews, those are ongoing. We launched the social pinpoint site over the summer.
Sorry, Karen.
We've had
I have to interrupt you again.
It's still not going.
It's still not going. Oh, it's maybe not in the right mode.
Can you see?
We can see, like when.
I've got it in presentation mode.
It's not showing up in presentation mode on our end, Karen, that might be,
Is that the,
I'm not sure if that's.
okay. We may be above my head as far as technical grip ones. Let me try one more thing. So I see that y'all see just the basic mode now, correct? I think I can see that.
Yes.
Now I'm going to flip over
when
to
you
presentation.
manually clicked, it's still in the basic mode.
It's still in the basic mode.
But maybe it seemed like when you manually click on the slide on the left, it did change. So.
Okay. Let me just go back to the basic mode, if that's okay with everybody, and we can muddle through that way.
Brittany has a suggestion.
Karen, yeah, if you go to slideshow at the
Yeah.
top of that PowerPoint,
Hang on, let me move. So slideshow at the top. Mhm.
yep, and then go from beginning, and then you should be able to tab
Okay.
right through there.
All right. So now are y'all seeing the beginning slide, the cover slide?
Nope,
No.
here comes
No,
Dominic.
but Karen, if you have multiple screens up, do you have multiple screens?
No, I'm on one laptop today.
Okay, never mind, I won't be of assistance.
Well, shoot, y'all.
But I think, yeah, so now it changed. When you just move the cursor over it.
Let's just do it in this basic mode. While I
Yeah.
know it's not ideal, at least you can see some of the visuals. Will that work, Amanda?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
And just, yeah,
Okay.
change it manually and that should be fine.
We do have a suggestion.
Oh, Brittany has another
Oh.
suggestion.
So if you stop sharing your screen,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you go to share again, share your entire screen, so when it goes into presentation mode, we should be able to see that. So we may see your computer background for a second.
God, let me, one more.
Isn't technology fun?
So much fun.
Have I mentioned I'm so excited to be on the ground with you all next week? I can't get that to work, Brittany. Let's just go this way,
Yeah.
and hopefully it'll work as I manually click through, and y'all just have to look at this stuff down the side.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. So back to where we are with the community engagement and strategic analysis. We've launched the social pinpoint site. People are contributing online. We've been doing stakeholder interviews quite a bit. Michelle's done many with the legislature. I've talked to a lot of folks in the community. We've talked to town leaders. Dr. Moses has been talking to a lot of folks as well. So we're gathering all that qualitative data, and that's been ongoing. What's new and what we're really going to dive into next week are the focus groups. So that will include frontline county employees. It will include 2 focus groups with agency clients of the Human Services Coalition, and they are helping those agencies recruit those participants, which is wonderful. We also will have a focus group of county clients to get their input. So we're working really hard to make sure everyone in the community has an opportunity to weigh in and participate in the process. And then the other thing that we're doing while we're there is we're doing the community forums, and we'll have one in Ithaca, one in Enfield, and one in Dryden to try to hit different parts of the county while we're there. In addition, wait, before I go, did that slide change?
did,
I think I
yes.
can see that it did.
We're
Okay.
good, Yep.
In addition to the qualitative conversations we're having with the community, we've also been reviewing other documents that you all have worked on over time, including your core values and diversity statement, your comp plans, both the 2015 and then the 5-year review, the community health assessment, the housing snapshot preliminary data from 2022, public safety reimagined, Office of the Aging Needs Assessment. There's lots of work plans and guiding documents that you all have that we've been reading, and then some KPI data or key performance indicator data from your departments from an operational perspective to really get grounded in where they are currently from a service delivery standpoint and what it's like over time. So all that is going into the content that we're working towards as we get to your plan development sessions. But a little bit more about what we'll be doing in the community forums. I wanted to walk y'all through at a high level what those hour-and-a-half sessions will look like. So this is the agenda that we use with those sessions. We'll start with an icebreaker open discussion question that's really anyone can answer. It's about their experience living in Tompkins County. We'll present the environmental scan, which is the qualitative and then some secondary data to ground everybody in what is currently happening in Tompkins County to help prepare them for the group discussions and breakout discussions that will guide them through. So in an hour and a half, there's about 25, 30 minutes of Dr. Moses and I sharing data and information and community feedback with the group. But the majority of the time is really them in small groups talking amongst themselves, envisioning what they would like the county to look and feel like, both as a community and service delivery standpoint, as part of the strategic plan development process. So some highlights from the environmental scan, and I believe Bridget is working to get you all a full copy so you have that. I wanted to give you a flavor of the types of things that we would be sharing with the community to help ground them. And once again, the purpose of this is so everybody is equipped to have the conversations and provide good, thoughtful feedback around where the county can go over the next 5 years. So we always like to present a little bit of Census Bureau data, population, median home value, the educational attainment level, the community, the poverty level, and we know that in your community that gets skewed because of your student population, so we'll touch on that a little bit. We really like to talk about the demographics from an age standpoint, especially for you all as a county government. I'll point your attention to the bars over the person 65 years and over, the difference between 2010, which is in blue, and 2020, which is in that green color. Your older population is growing, and that will obviously have an impact for you all as you design services for the community. And every other age group in your community is actually shrinking a little bit. So we like to point that out to residents because a lot of people don't know that and how that's occurring on the ground. So there's lots of other secondary data sources we'll present, but this gives you a little bit of a flavor of the types of information we'll show. Then we pivot and move towards what we've heard already from the community, either through the social pinpoint site or the qualitative interviews. And so this is one of the questions that's on that social pinpoint site is what are some of the things that the county government does well? People think that you all do a good job with tourism and visitor attractions, supporting arts and culture, that 911 and emergency response service, that's really important. And that shows up in a few different ways in some of our stakeholder analysis, which is interesting. People feel you're good at the preservation of natural resources. And then down at the bottom, some things that folks say that the county doesn't do so well, and that's facilitating housing options and affordability. I don't think it's a surprise to any of y'all. We've heard a lot about the cost of living and housing affordability. I think people are wanting to see more speed on criminal justice reform. And there's a lot of concern around climate change, the new FEMA maps that have come out. What are the implications as sea levels rise, as our weather patterns change on your community, and how will you all need to adapt to what that looks like? We ask, what are some of the things the county could do better? You'll see it at the top. This is really kind of an inverse of what you just saw. So some communities that doesn't align for you all, it does, which is nice. but it's that housing and affordability. And then also road and bridge infrastructure showed up here. People would like to see more emphasis on that, as well as the transportation challenge that you all have that's been longstanding between both bus service, roads, and rural community access into kind of the main part of Ithaca. Another thing that we'll share with the community is it's around quality of life and how confident are people that the community is going to be a better place to live in 5 years. You'll see in Tompkins County, most people are straddling that 3. They're not willing to commit that it's not going to be great, but they're also not at the 1 or the 2. And so when people answer a 3 or lower, we really want to know why. What would it take for the community, for them to say it's going to be a better place? And you'll see some of the themes that have emerged from those responses. People would like to see lower taxes, cost of living be lower, improved transportation and transit infrastructure. The issue of the child care desert in Tompkins County keeps popping up to the surface. There's the concern about crime and the reduction, whether that's the perception or what's actually occurring, I think is an open question. There's the issue of homelessness. People would like to see that decrease and services increase for the unhoused population. Improved housing options across the board, less political division, and then more diverse jobs and economic opportunity for everybody. So those are some of the themes that are emerging out of that question. And when we structure the community forums, we also ask this question in that context. So it's interesting to see what's alike and what's different between the online respondents and the folks that come to the forums themselves. Another thing we'll share with the participants of the community forum is what the community has already said they feel you all should prioritize. And I don't think it's surprising. A lot of it is around housing, roads and ridges, promoting economic opportunity and workforce development, and accessible transportation. That is really what people would like to see so far in the stakeholder engagement process, and we're by no means done. And then finally, just so you all know, some of the emerging themes from more of the qualitative conversations we've been having is that first, every single conversation I have had, when I ask what the county does well, every person said they feel like the staff truly care and want to make a difference. That's really good. They're sincere in that response, so that they feel that you all are really committed to the community. But then they share that the housing challenges are significant and it's every price point. They talk about from recruiting and retention for faculty at Cornell all the way to workforce housing for county employees. The access issue, especially for rural population, being an ongoing challenge. The issue of the perception of safety, especially hyperlocally within the city of Ithaca, that has popped up both for residents as well as employees as emerging theme. The issue and the provision of fire and emergency medical services, the overarching change in our society nationally around volunteer fire services really not working in most places anymore because of the way people structure their lives. So what does that transition look like? How does the county and the villages ensure that there is emergency medical and fire service as really the volunteer fire model changes? Stakeholders have mentioned that they would like to see the county take action more quickly. I think people would like to see a bias toward action. They feel that the staff has the capability to do and the county has the capability to do, but how do they get to implementation? And then the last bullet is around community engagement. A lot of folks I talked to said, you know, the county has all these really great services. And once I learned about them, I was so impressed. I just didn't know about them. So it's not just the communications type work that Dominic does, but really the on-the-ground staff community engagement about services for the county. So those are some of the themes we're hearing. I'm really intrigued to see what we'll hear as we reach more diverse populations next week and we expand this out. And so these are the places where we'll be holding the forums. We would love to have you all in attendance if you would like to be there. You'll see we have a midday one, an evening one, and a morning one to try to meet different needs of different schedules. And with that, I'm going to stop the screen share and get feedback and questions and input and any thoughts from you all.
Great, thank you. That's a lot of information, and I know that's
It is.
a snapshot, though, of all the information you all have been collecting over the past couple months. So, questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
How's Harvey home?
Come on, so we can hear you. And welcome to your first Government Operations Committee meeting.
Thank you for having me, and how are you, Karen?
Hi.
My name is Charlene Holmes, and I just started on Tuesday. I'm the new Chief Equity and Diversity Officer. I read this presentation before I came here, and as you know, the DEI scope is super important for the county. So I wanted to know just how do we inform the hot points, right, through our equity lens and identify who completed the survey thus far so that we can have some more demographic data that touches on our protected populations that exist here. Do you have some of that, or
No,
are
that's-
you able to inform?
Yeah, I don't have that offhand right now, but what we'll have as we go along the process, and I know we've talked in the steering team meeting about getting you connected as quickly as we can with Dr. Christine Moses, who is leading the Equity Lens part of the project. We're hoping through the outreach with the specific focus groups that we're going to reach some of the historically marginalized communities. So that is part of the effort from the equity standpoint. And then we're also working through, and we'll talk about this when we're with you all next week, some intentional specific equity lens questions that will be inserted into the plan development process to put equity really at the forefront of what that looks like in developing the plan. So it's really, who have we talked to? Have we talked to the right people, and making that an iterative, ongoing process and keep going until we get to the population. So make sure everybody is engaged in the plan development, and then making sure when the board or the legislator and staff are in those plan development sessions that we keep equity top of mind as we're having the conversations around guiding principles, objectives, and strategies. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Just making sure that that's always at the forefront, especially as we go through some of the data. Like if we have, for example, you gave us a qualitative data point of age. What are the demographics within that age group, right? What does that look like? How did you engage them? Us having that data is super important because we will have to move into climate surveys and things of that nature. So having those things in the forefront works for us to continue with the sustainability of the strategic plan. So I wanted to make sure as you're building that out, we're on the same page with that as well.
Absolutely. And I look forward to meeting you. Excited that you're on staff.
Same here. Thank you so much for answering my question.
Yeah, and just to confirm, you're going to be part of the strategic planning committee and taking place more of that. Taking part. Okay, great. Yeah. Other questions? Susan?
This may have been announced and I missed it. How are people being informed about the public forums for the focus groups, or were they invited based on completing the survey? Or is there a public announcement that I could share with people?
Yep. So the community forums, Dominic, I believe you're in the room, he has really taken the reins and managed the communication process for recruiting the kind of the all-call broad community invitation for the forums. The client focus groups are a much more targeted, individualized invitation because, to the previous question, we're trying to make sure that we reach parts of the community that are harder to engage.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like there have been a couple of press releases. Maybe Dominic wants to just speak to that for a second.
I remember seeing a couple.
Yeah.
Yes, so there are flyers that have been distributed around, though I haven't seen many hung up, so I will continue to distribute those. We have sent out a message to all of the about 3,200 people who subscribe to the legislature highlights with a very specific invitation to those interested parties. And we've sent wide press releases as well. I will say, it's very difficult. We send out press releases and the limited press doesn't pick it up and support those efforts. So it's a challenge, and our reach is only so far, but I will continue to do things through the rest of the week and into early next week. Thanks.
So if we share, I have 2 districts that have civic associations, and I usually share all the press releases, so that's a way of inviting them.
Absolutely, yeah. Forwarding along those
All right.
spaces is
I'll go back to
very
the
welcome and
Thank
often
you.
very successful. Thanks.
Yeah, Mike?
You've scheduled the forum for the morning in Dryden at the Southwood Library. I think it would be useful, and I'm sure, Dominic, you sent press releases with the Cortland Standard, but if we could get some kind of a little blurb in the Cortland Standard about it, we might be more successful in getting people to come. Because people in Dryden and Groton read the Cortland Standard particularly. So just a thought there. It's going to be hard to get people to come at 9 o'clock in the morning, or whatever time we started it, in Dryden for that. We may get a few, but we need to try to get as many as we can.
I will say the Cortland Standard is on our press release list, and I think there is an opportunity to think about additional resources in future, things like this for advertising spending in addition to just the press releases. Just an ongoing conversation and something I'll talk about in my updates later.
Great, other questions? Well, Karen, so you and folks will be here next week. I'm not sure, some of us will probably meet you with the planning committee, others may not have a chance to meet you, but you all will be back in November, right? And we'll have another meeting with the full legislature to talk about results and things that you have found. Is that all correct?
That is correct.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for the update and for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, bye everybody. See you next week.
Thank you. All right, we are going to move on to assessment and ask Jay Franklin, our Director of Assessment, to come forward. We have a resolution, and then we have a report. Let's just find that. Why don't we go ahead and just move the resolution, and then we can talk about it. This is a resolution indicating Tompkins County's ongoing intent to require a pilot for solar wind systems. Can I have somebody move that? Mike moves, Susan seconds, and hi, Jay.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me here this morning. I didn't get the memo, so I'm sorry. But I think I was planning on wearing that color tomorrow for the golf tournament. I don't want to mess up my outfit. So this resolution helps us administer real property tax law 487 a little bit easier for everyone. It's probably one of the worst sections of the real property tax law that's out there. So as it currently stands right now, when someone's installing solar, they should be sending a letter to the highest ranking official in the taxing jurisdiction of their intent to build. So this actually applies to all solar installations, solar panels on your house to the 110 megawatt array that we're having planned for Groton Lansing. So it doesn't make a distinction in the size. So what happens is once the solar company sends in that intent to build, we send a letter back saying we intend to require a pilot. Because if we don't, we're in the exemption. The solar company can apply for a full exemption for 15 years. This is just one of those CYA things that hopefully pushes the solar developer to the Industrial Development Agency for a pilot rather than coming to us. But in my next presentation, I think we're going to get more and more people coming to us for a pilot or simply just wanting to be taxable. But we'll discuss that a little bit further on. This, rather than having to send out, 10 letters a year out of Lisa's office, this just puts everyone on notice. We're going to require a pilot. I put in a size of 500 kilowatts. just because I didn't want to alarm the house panels that they would be required to have. But, you know, we'll take a look at where that is. We're still going to hopefully push these to the Industrial Development Agency through their uniform solar policy, but this is hopefully going to free up a little bit of time in these zones.
Okay, great. Questions? Comments? Dan?
Yeah, I think it's just a grammatical one, but I just wanted to double check. On line 21 of the resolution, we'll no longer have to send a letter with 60 days. Should that be within 60 days?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Did you get that, Brittany?
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we're ready to vote. All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. All right, back to you, Jay.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a quick update on the legislative session this year. There really wasn't a whole lot of real property tax legislation, which is unfortunate. New York State routinely fails the real property tax report cards that go out simply because we have no uniform level of assessment, nor do we have any cyclical reassessment cycle for New York State. You know, we have places that assess at 0.1% of market value. We have places that haven't done a revaluation since the Civil War. So there simply is no uniform equity within the Real Property Tax Administration structure in New York. Vastly different here since we do annual reassessments and we assess at 100% fair market value. That's the recommended structure from the International Association of Assessing Officers. So the rest of the states may not be in compliance, but we can't control the rest of the state, we just control this.
You can't? Can't control everyone else?
No, I wish I would have listened to my dad way back when he told me, you know, you can't change New York State, just focus on Tompkins County. But it only took 27 years for me to realize that, so. But there were a couple things that were passed in the budget, and I just want to touch on them, and then there was another piece of legislation. But New York State tried to simplify the low-income senior exemption, but that's going to far from simplify it because it's going to change the definition of income between towns and counties, and if we don't get all on the same page, our towns may have a different definition of income, so my people are going to have to calculate income multiple. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We're going to get out in front of TCOG in September, I believe, to talk to them, just to say, hey, don't do anything on this. But the new definition for income for the senior exemption is pretty simple. It's just your federal adjusted gross minus any taxable IRA distributions, and we add back in all of the untaxed Social Security income. One major thing that's not going to be is we can only add back in about $15,000 of capital losses for someone's adjusted gross income. So for the property owners that show 7, 8 figures of annual losses in their federal adjusted gross income will receive a 50% senior exemption now. So that the tens of thousands of dollars in property tax breaks because they have good accountants and can take advantage of the income tax. The income tax, in my opinion, is the most regressive tax we have. It in no way reflects the amount of income that you bring into your property when you're allowed paper deductions. There are a couple local options that I don't want to bring forward.
Jay, would you say that again? You think income tax is regressive?
Correct.
And that's why?
Yes, because it doesn't accurately tax your income. With all of the deductions, the paper losses that you can show, I have very wealthy property owners that have shown a negative 8-figure income every single year for the last 10. If they're not paying federal and state income taxes, that's all being made up by us. But when you can show paper depreciation losses on your rental properties, is that fair and equitable?
Okay, I see what you're saying, but in general, we don't consider usually income taxes as being aggressive because they're stepped in the amounts that's charged to based upon income, unlike sales tax, for example, which is very regressive because everybody pays the same rate.
Based upon the income tax returns I see, the more wealthy shows less income than the less wealthy who doesn't.
Yeah, but they're taxed at a higher rate.
But when you show a negative income, there is no taxes.
Well, that's true. You may want to look at some of the agricultural stuff too.
Exactly. It's when, my property tax books really aren't all that big, but the IRS guidelines is a lot more involved and a lot more in depth. So whenever we have carve-outs and exceptions, that's not about equity, it's about satisfying people. But the local options that we do have, we cannot count the untaxed Social Security. I'm not recommending that because I don't know the difference really between what is taxable and what is not, and it's really just all income as it is. We could count the IRA distributions or the individual retirement annuities as income. That's more like a savings account with those withdrawals, so it's not really taxing income if we're not going to also look at what other people take out of their savings account. And then the last one being reducing income by the amount of unreimbursed health expenses. That is absolutely impossible to administer. If you don't know what's not reimbursed, from my personal experience in other towns, there's nothing like seeing a pack of paper about 2 inches thick of all of their receipts from the year. And then you have to go through and count all of those up, and no. It's just not a good thing. Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Mike, and then Dan.
I was just going to point out on the IRA distributions, it depends on what kind of an IRA you've got. If you've got a Roth, that is basically a withdrawal from a savings account. But a traditional was not taxed when the money went into it. And I think that's maybe why they're suggesting that that might be added.
Do we have a way of estimating what this will affect the bottom line averaging of the tax rate?
I don't think much. We don't have many of those large property owners that will be receiving us, and in the grand scheme of a $10 billion tax base, it's really not that significant on a whole. Most of the other changes to the income are kind of minor and things that we used to count as opposed to what we don't count now. I don't anticipate a lot, just a couple major differences from those big commercial ones.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next one, I've talked about this before, but New York State in their 2022 budget adopted a new calculator that I have to use for solar and wind systems. It dramatically undervalues the market value of these systems. Anywhere between, I think, 50 to 75% is what I've seen. But New York State is trying to encourage more solar development, so this is one way that they can do it. The assumptions that they made in this calculator has energy prices declining significantly over the next 20 years, and we're smarter than that. We know, come on. So it's something, but right after they adopted it, a couple towns in Schenectady, I believe, sued the state over how they adopted it. It didn't go through their normal rulemaking process. So rather than go through the normal rulemaking process in the budget bill, they passed this again and said this doesn't have to go through the lawmaking or the rulemaking process. So now this is enacted, and hopefully they'll be updating this calculator on a yearly basis. But because of how much this undervalues properties, and the value of these properties will decrease over their lifespan, I think you're going to see more places just want to be valued according to what the market or the calculator comes out. We just did this with the Danby NSF properties out there on Government, I believe. So you may be seeing more of this. And one reason, the way our current IDA pilots work is they ramp up the payments, but as cash flow for these systems, as the life of the project goes, their cash flow actually declines. So we kind of do the Industrial Development Agency pilots kind of backwards. When they have more money, they should be paying more, and then by the end, when these systems are going to be dismantled, the payment should be reduced. So we don't hit that funding cliff. You know, at the end of the 20-year pilot, we're going to have a small hole in our budget when we rely on these pilot payments as opposed to gradually reducing them over the time. But that's kind of more theoretical on that.
Jane, you feel the new state system undervalues, but are we seeing actual sales of these solar installations that makes you feel that they're worth more?
Not actual sales. These systems are all very interrelated with the company who ends up developing them. I think right now there's only 2 companies that are actively managing and operating our solar arrays that we have right now within Tompkins County. I think it was True Green is kind of the major player. But I've seen enough appraisals done for the different solar arrays. One fun thing about my job is I can spend a lot of time on these new technology and trying to figure out how to value it. And I came out to about $1 million a megawatt when it first came in, and New York State's coming somewhere between 250 and 500. And that's looking at the amount of income that these properties can generate through the sale of electricity, subtracting out their expenses, their transformer replacements, in order to come to a discounted cash flow. And look at the life of a 20-year solar array, how much is someone willing to pay for that 20 years worth of income. But again, you know, I'm not predicting energy prices decrease, nor is any appraisal that I've seen. The only time I've seen that is through this solar calculator. There's other calculators on NYSERDA's website. When prior to this calculator, I worked with NYSERDA to create a solar calculator for assessors. And depending upon which NISO zone you're in, you know, around here was about at $1 million a megawatt. So I think that's a pretty good confirmed number, but it's just in conflict with this calculator. Thank you. And then the next piece, this has passed both houses, but hasn't been selected yet to be delivered to the governor, so it hasn't been signed. But this will allow our Industrial Development Agency pilots and other pilots to now be included in our tax-based growth factor. So as one part of our tax cap is how much new lumber do we have in the community in order to be able to increase that tax cap figure. But all of the Roll Section 8 properties, the properties that don't pay real property taxes, were excluded from this calculation. So any industrial development agency, new construction was never added in. And since any of our new projects that aren't student housing get a industrial development agency pilot, none of that new construction was then added into our tax-based growth factor. So this was passed once in 2017, but the governor at the time vetoed it with a complete misunderstanding of what pilots are and how the values are phased in. So we'll see what happens this time around. I don't know if this will be signed into law or vetoed again, but this is definitely something that more reflects reality. And if you're going to include all of the tax-based growth, it should also include the Industrial Development Agency pilots as well.
Any questions on that one? All right, well, thank you for that update. Is there anything else you want to share with us goings on in your office or any other updates?
No, we're just out in the field right now. You know, it's nice and quiet in my office. It's just me, Tammy, and Caitlin while all of the other appraisers are out, but we're out in the field and we are making the largest increases that I have ever seen in assessments for this upcoming year. You know, we're easily in the 15 to 20% range. We're seeing $100,000 increases as kind of the norm. You know, there really isn't anything that you can buy under 200,000 that's in a halfway decent shape.
You're talking about residential?
Correct. Yep. Yep. And one other thing with commercial, we haven't seen a whole lot of movement on apartments. Interest rates are high, taxes are high, so that's causing a downward pressure here on apartment prices, oddly enough. So we're also taking a look at them, but it's going to be another fun year. You know, we made 26,000 changes last year. We'll be doing that again. I don't see that this is sustainable for my office. So 2024, barring any change in the real estate market, we're going to really have to look at that annual reassessment program. You know, when I don't see my appraisers for weeks on end, and I have new appraisers, it's hard to train them on everything that my office does. You know, they were kind of forced into the last 3 years of revaluation, but the parcel by parcel revaluation is just a small part of what we do. And I got to get them trained on everything that we do, because we are going to be losing some key members of my staff in the next few years, me being one of them. So we got to get them trained up.
Where are you going? You're going to stay here forever, aren't you?
I got 4 years, 11 months, and 14 days. Well, I don't know, 14 or 15. I don't know if I can retire the day I hit 55 or the day after I hit 55. But no, I see why I'm approaching the longest tenure of the Director of Assessment. So.
Well, we appreciate you.
But we do have to get the office into a shape in order for when, you know, unfortunately the way the timing is, and I joke with that, but, you know, we'll have to see where things are, what happens, but we are going to be losing our 4 senior staff within that 5-year time period. It will be interesting.
Well, you have time to figure it out, I think.
Time flies.
That's fine. Mike?
I wanted to ask you about drones. There's been some news lately about drones being used, I think, by police and surveilling properties with them. And I know we talked a long time ago about properties where people don't really want assessors on them, that we'd really like to get a look at, and you know, whether drones could be used. I think the decision was not to use them, but I wondered, is there anything happening with that? Is that still the case?
Yeah, it's still new for the assessment functions. Maricopa County has been using drones actually for a significant period of time to collect new construction. You know, they'll drive up to the front of the house, take the drone out, pull out, measure the addition in the back, and bring it back to the truck and head on. You know, now that we do have that capability, it's something I want to look at. But we do have a contract with Eagle View that provides us with new aerial images every 3 years. We should be due again in 25. We got a new state aerial now in 2023. So we do have a lot more access to those off-the-road properties than we ever had before. I struggle with using a drone and people's privacy. Things have changed in this business from when I started in 95 over in Cortlandville, and you could knock on the front door, no one's there, you take the tape measure out, you walk around the building, and you see everything. You don't do that nowadays. You know, we were out in the field this year, and someone said, "Hey, stop sending your drones over my house, or I'm going to shoot it down." We're like, we don't send drones over your house. But I don't know who's doing that, it's not us. So there is that. I'd love to still have that discussion with Don and Rob, but you gotta weigh people's privacy as well. I know personally, if there was a drone in my backyard, I wouldn't bite it.
Well, thanks for that response.
I'm not adverse to doing it.
Questions for Jay? All right, well, thank you for being here and all the good updates. We always learn a lot. Yeah, have a good afternoon. All right, we have quite a few resolutions from administration. Let's start with, we have our PAR project approval review topics, so we'll start with that. All of you, Lisa.
Sure, and so the two PAR forms, project approval review, these are the summaries of proposed capital projects, the departments that, for which those projects apply are here. So the first one being the voting machines, and Steve and Alana, our elections commissioners, are here, and if you have questions on this, I would invite you to come up. And questions or comments from anyone? No?
Just wondered, are the machines actually failing that we have now? Can't get them repaired or something, or is it just that they're 10 years old and we ought to get new?
They're not failing. They're taking a lot more work to get them ready, for elections. We're finding issues come up when you're getting them ready that you might have to send them out for maintenance. We're finding, from other counties using the same machines that just as long as some counties are having issues, any serious issues where they had to, I guess make arrangements with other counties and the state board to come up with some machines because the ones they had weren't working. They're running, they're running to the, I guess, the end of their life. We'd like to, I'd like to have them in place by next, have new machines in place by next, by January. So for the elections next year, we'll have new machines. Can't guarantee that that's going to happen, but that's our goal.
We had substantial federal money for the first purchase, wasn't that true, of the machines? And now we don't have any grant money available?
The initial, you're correct, the initial purchase of machines back in 2008 was totally covered by grants. This time around, there's about an $80,000, what they call tier grant. I'm not sure what the acronym stands for, but we could use that money for voting equipment, but that doesn't even come close to, the amount of money we would need to purchase brand new machines. It will help.
Has your association been lobbying the state for some money? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm not up to date on that. I know that historically, over the last few years, since particularly with the implementation of early voting, there was a lot of, the legislature has had several grants that have helped out with payment for that. Right now, the only grants that we have available are this tier grant, and then there's a grant for reimbursing us for money that we spend on absentee ballots. Because now absentee ballots, we have to pay the postage of the return to the
I certainly, speaking for myself, I'd certainly like to see us going to our local state legislators and saying, we need some money. As you recall, this used to be a town charge for the voting machines and the elections, and then was it federal law or was it state law that said
state law?
The counties had to do it. We didn't have any choice. It was another mandate. But they said, here's some money for it. But now we're saying these machines need replacing, and there's no money out there. So we we end up being the unfunded mandate stuckee again.
So I think I'm remembering that you did have a couple of companies come and folks could look at the various machines. How did that go?
Well, we had, there were 4 companies that had their machines certified by the state. We had spent a day with 3 of those companies. And Lana and I had narrowed it down to 2 of the companies, Dominion and Currie. Harton or Civic, there was 2 things we just weren't comfortable with. And ES&S, it was just, we knew going in that it wasn't even worth it because the price of their machines, Hughes County, which is a very similar sized county as far as number of voting machines, plus, we got a quote from ES&S on their machine to Tompkins County with it was $1.3 million, where we're looking at probably half of that, so we didn't look at ES&S.
Okay, but you narrowed it down to 2.
Yeah, everybody to 2, we narrowed down to 2 of the machines.
Okay, anything else you want to add or other questions? Okay, well, thanks for being here and taking the time to talk with us about it.
Yeah. Well,
And then the second PAR form is for ITS infrastructure replacement, and we have Lauren on Zoom. Hi, Lauren.
Good morning.
Good morning, it's afternoon, good morning. Doesn't matter. Any questions for Lauren about this, or do you want to say anything about it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Oh, well, I'm sort of asking both. If anyone has questions, or if you want to say anything about this.
I can certainly answer any questions. I think, our infrastructure replacement has been working well for us when it comes to network infrastructure, any of the cyber stuff that we run into during the years. We took over this year the centralized computer replacement, which has been going well. Yeah, happy to answer any specific questions.
All right, Mike?
So we're talking about a 5-year capital project here, I think, the way I read your description. And it looks to me like there's just under $400,000 a year for 5 years. Is that going to take care of it, or are we going to have to do other funding along with this for our electronics?
I think our 5-year plan that we continue to push out has been covering it. That's been the beauty of this, is that we've been able to plan upgrades for like servers and storage and phone systems and big UPSs for buildings, cameras, so basically all of our infrastructure. So it has been working pretty well. Potentially when we move, if we move, we may have some specific projects there to move, fiber and those kind of things involved with the move. But in general, the infrastructure replacement capital account has been working well, and not we haven't had to ask for over the last few years anything additional, and I don't plan on it either. Now I think that there was an ask to take $100,000 out of this, which that would directly affect the computer replacement schedule. Right now we do about 200 computers a year, So if that does get taken out of our ITS infrastructure budget, we would lessen that amount for next year.
So the computer replacement is in this money too?
Yes,
So that's not coming out of departmental budgets then?
that's correct.
Thank you.
Anything else? Questions for Lauren? All right, well, you got off easy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, moving on to a bunch of resolutions. Let's go ahead and move the first one, scheduling a public hearing for the draft 2024 Tompkins County wide shared services initiative plan. Dan moves that, seconded by Susan. And I'll look at Lisa again.
So as required by the state every year, if we have if we are planning to submit a countywide shared services plan, then we are required to hold public hearings, and this is just setting that up. Once again, we are submitting a plan, and the draft is included in the packet, and that is to help fund the first year of the rapid medical response pilot program.
Great. Questions or comments? Dan?
I know that TCOG has been heavily involved in this discussion. The towns all seem excited about this and on board. Are we directly talking with EMS, volunteer EMS and paid EMS in the county? Are they all saying yes on this, or are we going to hear later on that maybe somebody's saying, hey, EMS need it?
Invite Bridget up to the table, but while she's coming up, I will say that the county's EMS coordinator, Department of Emergency Response, was actively involved in the creation of this plan and in the discussion. But Bridget.
Nope, that's correct, and we've actually received a letter of support directly from the Association of Fire Chiefs in support of this project. So they've been, supportive.
County Association of Fire Chiefs or the state?
County.
County, okay, that's great. So we haven't heard anybody, have we heard anybody speaking against this or raising concerns?
No, the exact opposite.
Very good,
Yes.
okay. Sounds great, thank you so much.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I've had good feedback on this. Tell me how you set this up. We're going to own cars, fly cars, or trucks, or whatever they are,
Yes,
and we're going to have employees.
yes.
And what department will administer that?
Department of Emergency Response.
Are they going to need additional managers to make this thing work? How is that going to work?
It will be managed by Joe Milliman, who's in the position of the EMS coordinator.
Okay. So he will develop the budget and things like that
Yes.
in the future?
Mm-hmm.
If this goes through?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So this is a public hearing, or we're setting a public hearing, and then which would be for October 3rd, would we also have the vote on the document at that time, or is that later?
That will be later. That will be likely in November. We'll offer you all an opportunity to provide your feedback, and then we would take that feedback and incorporate it into the final plan that's presented to the Shared Services Panel. The Shared Services Panel is actually the one that takes the formal vote to send it to New York State. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Sure. Okay, we ready to vote on this, to schedule a public hearing? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, next resolution, budget adjustment and appropriation of unspent funds from 2022 for Human Services Coalition over target request community agencies, Human Services Coalition 2022 distribution. Can I have somebody move that? Susan moves, Dan seconds. Who wants to tell us about this?
I believe it's simply they're requesting the use of unspent funds for 2022 and 2023.
Okay. Questions, comments? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, that's easy. Next resolution, budget adjustment and appropriation of unspent funds from 2022 for language access implementation to reduce barriers. Somebody move that, please. Susan moves, seconded by Mike, thank you. Comments?
Very similar to the last, this is a request to utilize unspent funds for the completion of this project in 2023 from the funds that were allocated for 2022.
All right. Questions? All right, all in favor? That's unanimous, thank you very much. All right, now we get to the fund policies. Let's go ahead and move the first one. Resolution to update the administrative policy manual, policy 02-47, lactation accommodations. Somebody move that. Dan moves, seconded by Susan. This is a new policy, I believe. And I don't know, Ruby, you want to talk to it?
Sure, and Ruby's here as well to address any questions. This is a new policy that puts us in compliance with recently passed federal and state legislation to accommodate, as it says here, those employees for lactation as well as breastfeeding. So if there's any questions on the policy, Ruby can answer them.
Great. Questions? Mike?
I have a little problem with, on page 40, under D, nursing a child at the workplace. Talk to Richard a little bit about this, based on the New York civil rights law, which makes it an absolute right to be able to nurse a child. I guess I don't like the way it's worded here. It says, bringing a child to the workplace is not recommended. And I don't think we should be discouraging that in the context of, let's say, somebody wanted to have their child brought to them for this purpose. It just comes across to me that we're not recommending it. And I don't think we really should be saying anything about it. I think it's an absolute right, and we just have to accommodate it, and I think this policy is about that. The state is mandating us to do that, and I think that's fine. But I'm just having trouble with that wording.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Mike. I would be okay with, I don't know if you want to make a motion, but just deleting that first sentence under D, nursing a child in the workplace.
That would make me happy.
And just starting with, an employee may elect to nurse their child during the scheduled time. Okay. Others feel okay with that? Or? Guess that's friendly then. Right, so we'll cut that out.
So it's the first sentence and the word however?
Yes, and the word however.
We would take out the however, starting with and, Dan.
Yeah. Does that work for you, Ruby?
Yes.
Other comments and questions about this? Yeah, I think it's comprehensive. It makes sense. Thanks for pulling it together. All right.
What about, excuse me, but if I can ask another question, that is, what are we doing about identifying locations in departments and refrigeration capacity?
Bridget and I spoke about that this morning. Bridget, would you like to share, or me?
Sure. So this will be a brief agenda item at next week's department head meeting, and then Ruby and I will be working with departments to sort of proactively identify those spaces. Department heads have had an opportunity to review this draft policy, and we've actually engaged with a couple of them who've started to think about how to best accommodate this. So that is our plan moving forward. And if there isn't a space, we'll be working with facilities to identify one.
Yeah, thanks. And again, thanks for working on this. Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, now we have several financial policies. I believe some of these we've talked about in the budget committee. First one is a resolution to update the administrative policy manual, policy 05-14, reserve policy. Somebody move that. And seconded by Susan. And I'll put Currie.
I just wanted to, we've been getting some feedback that the sound on the YouTube streaming is challenging, so just a reminder or encouragement for everyone to speak clearly into their mics.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, this is the new policy that we have not had in the past, reserve policy. It establishes the authority for us to set aside funding into designated reserves that we talked about. In the policy, it talks about what types of reserves you are recommending that we utilize, and also what to do if we are over or underfunded in those reserves.
Great, so this is also a new policy. And we did talk about it a little bit in budget, maybe? Or we talked about the cash management in budget.
Yeah, I think we had the presentation about what a reserve was, but the policy itself, I believe, is new today.
Okay, okay. I blend the budget committee and this committee together. Okay, questions or comments on the reserve policy? Dan?
Yeah. I'm just going to ask the question. It seems small, and I don't even know if I'm going to understand your answer. That's what I wanted to say ahead of time. At the bottom, bullet points, the second one, at a minimum, the capital reserve will be equal to at least 10% of the current year's budgeted local share. I guess I just was wondering what does that mean? Why 10%? Why a limit? Why a lower limit?
I don't think the 10% is really based on anything other than a recommended guideline from the state. It's not a mandate or anything. We were looking for a way to fund it initially, and that's what about $10 we used.
I mean, would there be any harm? Like, what would be the harm of if for some year, for some reason, we didn't have the money and we only put 5% in or 1%? Is there any harm in that, or is it just, yeah, I guess, go ahead. I'm not really clear in my mind.
I don't think there's harm.
Okay.
I think we were just looking to establish a consistent and appropriate level to maintain that fund. It's a big budget.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'd love to have it at 100%. Then we wouldn't have to bond, right? So just trying to get that established and going, but if you'd like that to be less, we can certainly entertain that.
Is it because less just wouldn't be meaningful? Is that kind of the reason for setting a lower number? Like what?
I think we just started at 10.
Yeah.
I don't think
Okay.
magic behind it.
All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, other questions on this one? Yes, we're ready to vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Resolution to update the administrative policy manual, policy 05-15, cash management and investments. Can somebody move that, please? Dan moves, Susan seconds. This is also a new policy, and we did have a really wonderful presentation last month at the Budget Capital Committee. So folks who weren't there may want to go back and watch that. It was very informative. But I guess, I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit.
I'd just like to point out that the policy that was in your packet is not the updated policy. At BCP, we went through a bunch of red line revisions and also some feedback from BCP and what they would like added. So we have updated that policy, and that's the one that was just handed out to you. So I apologize that wasn't in the packet to begin with. But again, this is a new administrative policy for the packet. It's sort of already always been in place in the finance office. We did make a few changes to it. We added to the original one that was in the finance. We added a bunch of definitions. You'll see there's several definitions. We tweaked language to follow the GFOA and New York State Comptroller's recommendations and what particularly surrounding what is permitted investments. We removed repurchase agreements from our list of investments, even though they are authorized by the Comptroller's office. We're at this time not choosing to participate in those. And we also added New York Muni Trust and Cayuga Lake National Bank to the list of current depositories. And also in the depository section, I don't know which that is now, we added that a depository would be able to be authorized if they were eligible to bank in your state.
Yeah, that's on, well, these pages aren't numbered, but it's about halfway through. There's a note.
Yes.
It's under third page.
Under D.
Under D, authorized financial institutions and dealers. There you go. Right, because previously, authorized institutions were in the county.
Correct.
And your suggestion is to make it for all of New York State. And we did talk a little bit about that in budget. Okay, questions, comments? We will have a chance to talk about this again at the next budget committee meeting. So if you reread it and you want to come to that, and then of course it will go to the full legislature as well. Okay, are we ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous.
The new policy.
Yeah, the one that was handed to us. All right, and now we have resolution to update the administrative policy manual, policy 05-02, fiscal policy. Somebody move that. Susan, Mike seconds.
I can speak to this one. So the legislature just had recently adopted changes to the fiscal policy, and shortly after that, a number of questions came up as to how we in the county entertain requests for funding from agencies that aren't already in the county's budget or otherwise contracted in the county's funding process. And so this was my attempt to address this in our fiscal policy. I started out by, so it's all of the changes are on packet page 66. And kind of starting off in the broader view that through a strategic operations planning process, the county and the county leaders, the legislature establishes community needs needs and priorities. And through the budget process, the county administrator and legislature determine the appropriate level of funding for programs. And so there's a broader view of what the community's needs are and how we are funding programs to meet those needs. And then non-routine requests for funding by organizations outside of the county should be assessed as to whether or not they fit in that broader, overall goals and needs, and whether or not they're based on emergent concerns. So it was suggested that these requests may be presented to appropriate program committees, should come to the county administrator for inclusion in the budget. Wherever possible, if there is a vetting process through a particular department or an agency like the Services Coalition, that would go through that process for consideration and recommendation to me. And I would notify the ECP of the request in writing. And that would be the process. Okay, questions? Comments? All right. I feel like we looked at this. I read it and I was like, we just did this, didn't we?
I couldn't find it, I was back, when, was that more than 2 months ago?
We did about 2 or 3 months ago.
Looked at the last 2 agendas, I couldn't find it.
Yeah, so it's just inserting this section in.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. It's good to have clarity on what we should do in this situation. Okay, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Great. Thank you very much. All right, I think we are going to talk a little bit more about the rules of the legislature. So last month we, in your packet is just a couple of red line changes that I made. Everyone seemed to be good with that, but we didn't have a chance to go through Dan's suggestions and changes. So they are included in here, but I don't know if you want to kind of walk us through, Dan, your suggestions?
I think that's probably the best way to go, is to kind of delve into each one. Okay. So the first part is about electing the vice chair, and I know the last time that this situation came up, when there was a deadlocked vote, we suddenly realized we didn't know what we were supposed to do about the vice chair. With a deadlock vote on the chair part, we didn't know what to do with the vice chair part. There were differences of opinion. And just reading through this, I feel like there's still a little bit of room for interpretation. So I was wondering if we want to be a little more clear of what we want. So my first suggestion starts in the 3rd paragraph. And it says, after a chair is elected, a vice chair of the legislature shall be elected. But we know that there are circumstances where a chair could be elected. For instance, the temporary chair, is that what we call it? Yep. Does that trigger a vice chair election or not? I was wondering if we want to say.
Yeah, it does. It is a little unclear. I think you're suggesting after a permanent chair is elected.
I think that would be one way to be clear about it, if that's what we mean.
So in 2020, when we deadlocked on the chair, I think we turned to the county attorney to find out whether we could then proceed to elect a vice chair. And I think he said we couldn't.
Right.
And so does this solve that problem?
I feel like when the small group worked through these rules, I remember just that phrase, after a chair is elected. I think we felt like that was enough, that was designating that you had to, elect the chair and then you could move on to the vice chair. But you're suggesting that it could be unclear if it's the temporary chair or not.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because this is a lot of trouble back then.
There's a lot of trouble, yeah.
Including the efforts of the temporary chair at that time.
I think adding the word permanent or, I think that would work.
Does it do any harm? Does it do any?
I don't think it does any
create
harm.
extra confusion?
No. Because I think you're just designating that you're not referring to the temporary chair. I don't know, Katrina, is that?
I agree. I think it just adds clarity.
Okay. Is anyone opposed to adding that word? No. Okay, great.
Okay, and then continuing on that same theme, the rules provide for, and it did happen in 2020, where the county clerk chooses a chair. Should that event trigger a vice chair election?
Yeah. Because you still need to have a vice chair.
There's a time limit on that point.
Well, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, there was. It's like
3 months or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2 months. There is a time limit.
Can we find that in the rules?
Well, it's in the charter, I think. It's in the charter that says if the county clerk makes that appointment, it lasts for this much time or until the legislature elects a permanent chair. Yeah.
Are you looking that up, or?
If you give me a minute, I will,
Sure,
but I
of
do
course.
know that Shauna was appointed chair in 2020, and then Leslie was elected
Right.
by the body after that.
Right. And it was only a handful of days.
Yeah, it was just, it was like Maureen announced it, and then we moved forward with electing Leslie.
Yeah.
I believe Shauna resigned, or whatever that work term is.
No, she just got replaced once we nominated her.
Okay.
Once we elected a permanent chair.
Right, so should we come back to that one when?
Yeah, okay.
And then I said, regardless of whether or not we add that sentence, I think the sentence in the fourth paragraph that starts, until a new vice chair is elected, should be the sentence of a new paragraph. In other words, I think 2 paragraphs got squished together there.
Oh, okay, so it just,
So in the fourth paragraph,
just start a new paragraph.
I'm trying to find it myself now.
Until the new vice chair is elected. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, okay. People okay with that? Okay.
Okay. And then, still in that fourth paragraph, in the event that it talks about the vice chair is unable to continue serving, the order of succession of legislators, as adopted by resolution, shall be used to fill the role of vice chair until a new vice chair is elected. So that order of succession, is that usually what we do in December or January? I was trying to recreate it.
This year it went through the first meeting in February.
That's when we do the succession. So
is the previous year one in effect? Right, I remember we talked about this.
Yeah.
At length, because it's confusing, because if somebody is suddenly off the legislature that year, or, yeah. Okay, so what do you want to do about it?
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
In that resolution that is established every year, we could even say that this will remain in effect until the new resolution establishing the new succession of members.
The following year?
Yeah.
That works. Mike?
And if someone isn't on the legislature anymore, because we have 3 people in the succession, it just goes to one of the others.
Yeah. Yeah. We wouldn't invite them back just to.
Might be a good idea.
Yeah. That makes sense, Brittany. Does that work?
I think so. I mean, there is a scenario where nobody on that list is present. I guess we can't cover everything, but okay.
Well, there would be nothing to prevent, if that happened, there'd be nothing to prevent the legislature from moving forward with a resolution even earlier to make a designation so it would be in place.
Okay, and then in the last paragraph in Rule 1, I'm suggesting that we change he, she to they, and there's going to be 4 or 5 of them throughout the rules. And for each one of them, I just wanted to make sure that this did not create any grammatical confusion referring to plurals or not, and it did not, in my opinion.
Okay, that works for me. Is that okay with folks? Maybe Brittany or Katrina, you could just go through and find the ones that Dan.
I did.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Okay, Rule 2, quorum. The last paragraph, another one, that's another he, she to they. Rule 4. Okay, it says proclamations will be read. And I don't know, we went through a bunch of years where we didn't read all the proclamations, and now it is the practice to read the proclamations. And I'm wondering if we want to allow ourselves, like, right now the rules say will, which means that we must, but should we change it to may?
That's something I wanted to bring up because we have very, very lengthy proclamations. I believe in some municipalities, the bigger municipalities, when they do them, they may read the title and maybe the first whereas and then the resolved. And I wondered if maybe we ought to think about whether for these lengthy ones we might do something similar. Or maybe leave it up to the chair if there's something, you got a lot of people here, and maybe it's proper to read the whole thing. But sometimes we don't even have anybody in chambers to receive the proclamation, and they go on. Not that the services that they have performed aren't great, but it does take a lengthy time to review them.
I'm okay with that change. And then, maybe having more conversation about what you're saying, Mike. I don't know that we need to put that in the rules, but, folks being aware that, exactly what you said.
And maybe when the resolutions to be drafted, we should let folks know that, we're only going to read these, so you might want to have your most important points in the first couple of resolves or whatever we would decide.
Okay. Thoughts on that? Okay with that? Okay, all right.
Okay, then there's another his, her to their in Rule 4. Then in Rule 4, number 4, I got to catch up myself here. Just a comma after if known. I think that otherwise, I just think it's a little confusing otherwise.
Nice comma.
Live for these moments.
The Oxford comma.
The Oxford comma. Okay, and then there's another his, her to their in number 5. Okay, Rule 5, order and decorum. Another his, her to they are. Okay, so here's some more deeper stuff. Rule 5, it says, under conduct outside of meetings, first paragraph, last sentence, at all times, legislators should strive to present a positive and constructive view of county government. So I don't have any questions or comments about this, but I was just interested to see that and, to think about how that applies to what we say and how we should say it. So I just wanted to draw people's attention to that. I like that sentence a lot. I'm glad it's in there.
I'm sorry, where are you?
We are in Rule 5, order and decorum. And then it says conduct outside of meetings.
If you're in the little yellow book, it's thing we added in, because we added a lot of stuff about order and decorum when we went through this. I feel like that might be part of it. Okay.
Okay, Rule 7, rules of voting. Number 7, I think we just need to add the word "and," no biggie. It currently says paragraphs 2, 4, 5 of this rule. Okay? Rule 9, motion to rescind. So first of all, there's a list of, I'm just reading myself, give me a second. It says a motion to rescind is made in the following cases. Can we just make those bullet points? It just seems to me a little easier to absorb. Okay, very good.
They just feel like different paragraphs.
Yeah. Second to last sentence says, where a resignation has been acted upon or one has been elected to or expelled from membership or office. And I thought the word "one" was strange there. I think it means a person, but and does it lose any meaning if we change it to a person?
No, I think that's fine. Makes it a little bit more clear.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. And then my final one, where it says, and the person is present or has been informed of the action. And my question is this relevant anymore when everything is streamed and recorded? Is there any, can we eliminate that phrase, or is there any scenario where that phrase would still come in handy? It just seemed like a bit of an anachronism to me, that a person has to be present, but maybe not.
So this is referring to when a motion to rescind cannot be made. So it cannot, right? This is under the bullet.
Yes.
These would be the bullet points.
Yes.
I'm not sure I even understand that.
I'm a little lost. Can you repeat?
Sure. We're on Rule 9, motion to rescind. And then, let's see. Second to last sentence. Second to last sentence. Where a resignation has been acted upon or one has been elected to or expelled from membership or office, and the person is present or has been informed of the action.
Yeah, that doesn't quite make sense. Because
Actually, it's funny, this is what last time, this is one of the things, I have question marks by this, and I can't remember the exact discussion, but I think Rich talked about it, because I didn't understand this at all.
yeah.
Confusing.
So I think it's saying we've already made a decision, or we've elected to do something, and we've told the person that we're doing it, and we've already voted to do that thing. We can't then rescind it because we've told somebody. I don't know why they would have to, or why they are present, but I think it's in the case that we've done something, we posted it in the newspaper, and we can't go back on it now. I think that's what it means. But the part about the person being present, I mean, maybe you don't want to talk about it if the person is present. I don't know.
So it's almost once it's been made public.
Right, once something has been made public, you can't vote to go back on it. That when it's related to somebody being removed or expelled from office. Right.
Sometimes what happens is somebody resigns, and then they say, oh, you should have done that, so now we want to rescind that resignation. I kind of think that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Which I really can't do without.
Can't, once you've resigned, you can't change that.
There are processes under state law which have to be resigned.
Right.
But what about the person being present part?
Yeah, that's weird. I would be okay with just taking that part out, and just saying, where a person has been elected to or expelled from membership or office, and they have been informed of the action.
I just wonder if somebody that comes to the state law somewhere, county law, maybe we ought to double check that before we decide that we can.
Yeah, okay. Katrina has that in or not? I'll check on it. Okay.
Okay, did we get anything about the charter yet on that issue?
I did not find it in the charter, but in the rules it says that the county clerk would appoint a member of the legislature as chair who shall serve until the legislature itself elects a new chair.
Yeah, I don't remember any time frame on that.
I don't have a time frame, and I don't remember Shauna resigning. I remember her being appointed, and then the legislature elected Leslin.
Maybe my recollection is wrong.
Yeah, but I think the same thing. So.
Well, it was some version of that. I mean, I think she said, you know, thank you, but I'm calling for another election or something.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Sigler was elected temporary chair for 30 days. Right.
And that's in there, and I remember that. So there is no, as far as we know, there's no county clerk appointee timeline except if there's another election.
I couldn't find anything in the charter. I'll look, I mean, I can check into it further after the meeting, but yeah. I know. Let's keep thinking on that one. But what was the change that you wanted?
Okay, so the point was, so now the county clerk has appointed a chair. Do we now have a vice chair election or not?
Oh, right.
I don't know. If we don't, we could go an entire year without a vice chair based on these rules as I interpret them.
The thought about that has always been that there ought to be discussion about who your chair or vice chair are working with, and whether the person who's trying to be chair wants to have somebody who's not necessarily they plan to work with elected. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one to try to decide that, or whether to go ahead and have, because if you elect the vice chair at that point, and then the appointed chair is no longer chair for some reason, then the vice chair takes over until you elect a new chair again.
Well, I mean, it's in here, until a new vice chair is elected, the previous vice chair shall continue in that role. So, and you can't elect a vice chair until the permanent chair is elected.
But if the previous vice chair continues in the role, then why didn't the previous vice chair become the chair, or take over the chairmanship?
Because we were having a vote. We were supposed to be having a vote. So I think what you're saying is, yeah, that vice chair could continue to serve as long as there is no election of a new chair, which isn't what we want.
And it isn't what we did. So I believe our county attorney at the time declared that the clock had reset or something like that.
And then we couldn't. We didn't elect a new vice chair.
We did not.
Yeah.
And there was but the previous one didn't continue serving for some reason. It was Shauna, right?
And that's why we put this in. Until a new vice chair is elected, the previous vice chair shall continue in that role. So it's saying that.
We put that in now.
Yeah,
Oh.
we put that in now, when we went through this.
Oh.
To clarify, what would the vice chair do in this situation? They would continue to serve. And then we added, in the event that the previous vice chair is unable to continue serving, as in they termed out, the order of succession of legislators, blah, blah, blah. So I think it's covered. And we kind of have to keep moving.
Okay.
So, lots of changes, including the other ones. Will you folks be able to prepare a resolution and we'll look at this next month to vote on? Okay. And we can always continue conversations about the rules. I think I will go back to our Roberts rules and try to continue that discussion and see what other topics we need to refresh for the next meeting. Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone. I do not have a report other than to thank everyone for showing up in the appropriate colors this time, and I think hopefully we will, this trend will continue. Lisa, do you have anything else you want to tell us about?
I was just wanting to introduce our new Chief Equity Diversity Officer, Charlene Holmes. She spoke earlier in the meeting, and many of you had the opportunity to meet her before Tuesday night's legislature meeting, but Tuesday was her first day. I'm very happy to have her on board. She learns about the county and county departments and our legislature.
Welcome, Charlene. And you will, in the future, be on the memos about appropriate clothing colors. Thank you.
That's all for me.
All right. Bridget, anything?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Holly's not here. Director of Finance?
I just wanted to let everybody know that the plan is that the auditors will have the draft audited financial statements to me tomorrow. And they will be at BCP on Monday for a presentation, and then to the full legislature on the 19th. So if something should go south with that plan, we might have to call a special meeting because they have to be approved by the end of September.
All right. Okay. Questions for Lori? All right, thank you. Communications Director, Dominic.
Thanks. I have several brief updates for you. The first of which is the upgrades in this space to our streaming technology. You may have noticed several different parts of the upgrades. New cameras are likely the most visible upgrade that we've done, but we completed a capital project, barring some technical services that need to be provided, to upgrade our equipment upstairs, and we'd like to show it off to legislators before the meeting on September 19th, and we can follow up with that. Rob's going to do a little tour for the viewing public. A significant amount of upgrades and work, and thanks to ITS, the clerk's office and facilities for their support throughout, as well as Rob. And so there's several different things that allows us to do. It will look much better with different lighting. Today, lighting is less harsh and it still looks very good, for example. And the technology is more serviceable by vendors and by our staff, which is nice as well. There have definitely been a few bumps in the road we're working on. I've heard that audio on YouTube continues to be a little bit of an issue for some individuals, and we're troubleshooting that this afternoon. So thanks for everyone's patience. And if there are questions, I can answer them on it, but I'll also add that the screens, the update to the screens in the space is also moving forward. We're just checking all of the details with vendors to make sure we have exactly what we need to pull that off. So that's one update. I presented at the last meeting about the county's website and our opportunities related to that. I won't preempt any budget conversations, but just wanted to have an ongoing ability for folks to ask questions if needed. Still very focused on how to make that the best tool as possible. 2 meetings ago, I updated on our translation and language access policy. I can say that at this time, we have expended all of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that we have committed to translating content on our website and with our materials. So that's another area for budgeting and planning moving forward to align with the policy. And I will be able to bring to future meetings or, in regular updates to the legislature, some concrete numbers on the number of page visits by folks using those different languages. I want to be able to give you that very specific data. The last thing I'll share is that I know each year the legislature names an official newspaper, and that conversation is robust, and I appreciate that very much. And I have spent quite a bit of time researching to make sure that you have all the information that you'll need from our end this year as to where that designation comes from, why it must be made, resources and details around that. I know that typically happens in November, that's as I've been able to see, so I intend to bring a memo to this group for next month outlining those details, as well as I've heard some interest in advocating to New York State to change laws that require a print daily purchased newspaper, and so I'll bring forth some examples of resolutions or legislation that's at the state level that could be advocated for as well. So yeah, that's the update for now. I can answer any questions that folks have.
And the PAB?
Oh, yes. Sorry, thank you. The Public Information Advisory Board, our chair, Larry Roberts, was intended to be here today but was unable to make it. That group has put together and will be publishing, if a paper will accept it, an op-ed on the state of local news and opportunities to support local news and reporting in the community. And so I believe that will be going out from PAB, Public Information Advisory Board, to the media they'd like it to be published in within the next few weeks. And as soon as that's published or sent out, I'll make sure all legislators have a copy of that as well. And thanks to Amanda for your participation in that advisory board. It's very helpful to me.
Mike?
If we're thinking about lobbying for change in legislation on the official newspaper, which I think is fine, we might want to think about if they could change it slightly to allow the newspaper to be either in the county or, say, an adjoining county.
It's a great point. You can certainly add that in there. I can see if that's in any of the legislation being currently
That
considered.
might give us a little more opportunity.
Great.
Questions for Jonathan? All right. Well, thank you for those updates.
Thanks.
Any committee members have anything you want to bring up this time? All right, there are a couple of budget adjustments and transfers for review. And anything else before the committee today? All right. We will be having a group photo when we are off camera. So thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the staff for everything you've been doing. And we are adjourned.